Welcome to this new show called Spider Tales. I'm Scott Action Jackson, and as the name implies, I'm gonna share some of the tales, early tales for now, of Spider Man. And this video series idea is kind of similar premise wise as far as Reploid Bill Bush with his keeping up with the X-Men stuff. Similar, but not going to be exactly the same. I'm going to be sharing, well, at least in these first couple episodes, comics. The first couple comics that Spider-Man has been in, my views and opinions on them, especially what happens inside of it. And to start this off, let's kind of start how I got introduced into the Spider-Man lore itself. When I was a little kid, at the local library, there was this book that I checked out regularly. It was labeled Spider Man The Secret Story of Marvel's World Famous Wall Crawler. Now, this was an actual 1 out of 4 books. The other ones covered the Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, and Captain America. Now, back when I found this, it was kind of transferred over into a hardback book, a thin hardback book, considering originally it had the first appearance along with I think one other additional story from another issue further on top of some stuff about his powers and abilities. But recently, I've actually been able to get this book in its kind of original paperback format that it was in. It took a long while to actually look it up. It was actually easier to try and look up what the actual book was when I typed in like Spider-Man book 80s. But anyway, we're gonna hop into the first appearance that Spider-Man ever had back in Amazing Fantasy number 15. Let's first go over the cover. The kind of infamous cover of Amazing Fantasy number 15 that more or less has been kind of done to death among other comics, not only in the Marvel universe, the Marvel franchise, I mean, but also other places as well. I mean, I think even The Simpsons did a little homage to it. And also, the recent Spider Man Homecoming actually had a movie poster that looked similar to it as well. Now we go on to the first page inside. Spider Man and a really very early drawing of him next to the word Spider-Man. But as we go down the page, let's go and look at the very bottom here where it has the actual creators of Spider-Man, being Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And unfortunately, I think it was like a couple yesterday where I just heard that Steve Ditko passed away at the age of 90. And it was announced. Well, when I'm recording this, it was like a day ago, yesterday, that I heard about it. But apparently, he was found the night before or something like that, and it didn't become official until the day after, which would have been yesterday. Time and stuff. Go figure. But anyway, in this first image, we see a bunch of kids pointing and laughing at this wallflower that is Peter Parker, with a nice silhouette behind him of a spider, webs, and the silhouette of what would be Spider Man. And on to the next page, where at the top we get Peter's Uncle Ben waking him up, onto Peter having some breakfast and his aunt presenting his favorite breakfast, wheat cakes. I think they're also called pancakes, but I guess they're different different kind of milk and stuff that was used. But anyway, I don't know all the technical terms and stuff like that. But let's just move on. Uh, then we go to some of the stuff in school, where one of his teachers is praising him. Then we go to him trying to ask out one of the girls from his school, and she rejects him because there's dreamboats like Flash Thompson are around. Yeah. Yeah. Good luck with those jocks. There'll be nothing but trouble later on, depending on what happens to them. But anyway, those who know the Spider-Man lore knows stuff that happens to Flash Thompson anyway. So Peter then goes on to try to get some people together to go to a science exhibit that's going on. In which case they shot him down and say, "Give our regards to the Atom Smasher, Peter. See you around, Bookworm." See, with stuff like this, being insulted and made fun of, I can really relate to it. It happened to me in school. I mean, not all the time in school, but a majority of the school time, it happened to me. People made fun of me. People picked on me. I mean, hell, sometime years ago, well, after I graduated high school, some people were still making fun of me because I don't drive, I don't have a license, and I'm usually walking from place to place, and people make fun of me because of that. So, in many ways, I understand Parker and his frustration and sometimes anger with some of these people who have picked on him for who knows how many years because, according to this book, that's all that's been happening to him. And I hear that he's done a lot worse to some of these kids that try to accept him. It's like, excuse me, but years after years of getting picked on, and you expect somebody to just instantly forget all that? No, 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 no. Anyway, we go on to Peter saying, "Someday I'll show them. Someday they'll be sorry. Sorry that they laughed at me." Anyway, the science exhibit goes on, talks about how they can control radioactive rays here from in the laboratory, and then we see a little spider start coming down from a web, and the spider gets zapped, and somehow the spider jumps from there to Peter Parker's hand and bites him. How a spider like that got that much of a jump, I don't know, especially from just getting hit by radioactive rays. Now, I know realistically, if a radioactive spider bites you, you'll probably end up dying from the radioactive materials in it. And that's assuming that the spider itself doesn't die immediately. But anyway, the spider bites him. He's like, "Ow. The spider bit me, but why is it burning so? Why is it glowing that way?" And then he doesn't feel good. He has to step out, and the scientists think that Parker got unnerved from the experiment and think he might have a weak stomach. We go to Peter Parker outside with, I don't know why, but in what I'm looking at, Peter's fingers are yellow, high radioactive. And he's like, I don't understand what's going on. My entire body's changed with some sort of fantastic energy. And it's like, honk, honk, because he must be out in the street or something. Honk, honk. And then a car just goes rushing by him, and he just hops onto a wall. Now, we see something similar to this in one of the United States TV miniseries, I want to say, that they tried, a live action miniseries that they tried, where a car almost ran down Peter Parker and he just started climbing up. But then again, in that version of Peter Parker, he was more of a scientist than a photographer and older. I mean, this Peter Parker in this first comic seems like he's in high school, while in that mini series he was more or less college and much older. But anyway, Peter is starting to climb. He continues to climb. A little kid sees him. He's like, "Mommy, look, the man walking up the side of the building. That's the last horror movie I take you to, young man." I'd like to know what kind of horror movie where you see a normal guy climbing up the side of a building. Because if a normal guy is climbing up the side of a building from a horror movie, the only one I can think of that would be years and years later, and that'd be like one of the Fly movies. But Peter gets to the rooftop and crumbles a steel pipe like if it was paper, and he realizes it was a spider egg. Somehow gave him powers and stuff like that, and then he starts climbing down, I guess, a cable, and then he walks away from, I guess, a street corner where we see a spider web and a spider looking on at him. And then a few minutes later, we see Parker looking at a thing for $100 to the man who can stay in the ring 3 minutes with Crusher Hogan. Crusher Hogan. Let's talk about this for a second. Because I think over the years, with the different versions of the origin of Peter Parker and Spider Man, well, origins of Spider Man, this wrestler has changed over the years. I mean, they say Crusher Hogan. Well, guess who they're trying to reference here? Hulk Hogan. For those of us wrestling fans, we kind of figure they're referencing Hulk Hogan. Let's just go with that. But it seems weird that that would happen because in the first Spider-Man theatrical movie, the wrestler is actually the guy who's Macho Man Randy Savage playing Bonesaw. So it's kind of funny there where we take the references, and I guess even the movie makers kind of acknowledge the references too. But seeing this ad, he says it's a good chance to test his power. So he goes back home, gets a change of clothes, and puts, I guess, some kind of stocking over his face. I don't know how else he got this because he hasn't created his webbing yet. But he puts his stuff on. He goes up. He challenges Crusher for that $100. He gets in the ring. Crusher tries to run after him. He dodges. He picks up Crusher. Put me down. You win. You win. Okay. And I'm guessing the whole contest was supposed to be 3 minutes, and I'm guessing all that took place maybe within seconds. So I guess this is another situation where it kind of mirrored the first theatrical movie, where you were supposed to spend so much time in the ring with the wrestler and you didn't spend the full amount.
Hey, Freak Show! You're going nowhere! I got you for 3 minutes!
But after dropping down Crusher Hogan, some agent in the crowd sees this and he's like, that masked character may be just what I'm looking for. Turn page. So the agent meets up with the kid and is like, with that act of yours, I can make you a fortune. And keep the mask angle. It's great showmanship. Here's my card. Call me. You'll be a smash hit on Ed Sullivan's show. Yes, a long time ago there was a variety show or talk show, stuff like that, called Ed Sullivan Show. They had different guests on and stuff like that, but you can look that up online. Meanwhile, Peter gets back home and starts creating an actual, real spider-like costume. And his Aunt May and Uncle Ben come walking in on him while he's starting to work on it. So, yeah, they come in bringing him some crackers and milk. Meanwhile, he also works on his what would be his webbing, showing his webbing, experimenting with it. Then he gets the full costume on, which is more or less the base costume that we know and kind of love, except for the spider logo is a bit fat, which I think over the years that fat spider shrinks down and then grows back again. But yeah, he tests the costume. He tests the shooting the webbing up on the ceiling and sticking on the ceiling. Woohoo! Okay, world, better hang on to your hat. Here comes the Spider-Man. So, part two. Some camera guys saying I've seen it with my own eyes and I still don't believe it. As we see Spider-Man just on the wall, and we see onlookers dazed at or amazed at it, awestruck, and Spider-Man extinguishes a little candle with his webbing, and his agent says to cut it out, don't give him too much, leave him begging for more. And we go on some people wanting to get pictures of him, put him in magazines and movies, and he tells them to see my agent, boys, I'm busy. closes the door, and here comes one instance that is famous in the Spider-Man lore, at least as far as Peter Parker. There's a thief, a burglar that just runs by with a police chasing him, and he says, "Stop him! Stop, thief! Stop him! If he makes it to the elevator, he can get away." Haha, made it. The officer kind of reprimands Spider-Man, Peter Parker, saying, "What is with you? All you had to do is trip him up or hold him just for a minute." "Sorry, pal, that's your job. I'm through being pushed around by anyone. From now on, I just look out for number one. That means me." "Why, I ought to run you in." "Save your breath, buddy. I got things to do." Now, see, in the Spider-Man lore, this can kind of branch off different directions. There's one alternate universe where he actually did stop the thief. Right here. Which we hear some of that in some of the Spider-Man multiverses things that goes on in animated series, which that right there, if Peter had actually done that, that would have been nice. I would have liked to have read a comic that might have had that happen to see where his life might have went from that way. But after this uh, failure to stop the thief, Peter just goes back home, and his Aunt May and Uncle Ben bought him a microscope, and he's glad. And he's like, "Gosh, that's terrific! You're the greatest family any feller ever had." And he goes on thinking about how they're the only ones who've been kind to him, have treated him well, and stuff like that. And it's like, if this is true, no wonder he gets angry and upset with those kids in high school, especially if they treat him so badly. But then again, I don't think the teachers treat him that badly. But anyway, then we go on to newspapers going by and more of Spider-Man showing his skill. And one night, a police car's in front of their house, and an officer tells him that his uncle has been shot, murdered. And he's like, "No, it can't be. Who did it? Who shot him?" "It was a burglar. Your uncle surprised him, but don't worry, lad. We got him trapped. He's in an old Acme warehouse at the river waterfront. We'll get him." He's like, "No, no, no. I've got to get him." And this is the point where he starts taking over a little more of the Spider-Man that we know. But he says, "I know the old Acme warehouse. It's been deserted for years. The killer could hold off an army in that gloomy old place, but he won't hold off Spider-Man." Then we get him doing some web swinging across the city. Meanwhile, at the abandoned warehouse, we see policemen looking up at the warehouse, the murderer inside, and then the murderer turns around and spots Spider-Man. "Surprised to see me?" "Not half as surprised as you're gonna be." Spider-Man jumps down, thief tries to run away, confronting, web zipping the gun, punching the thief, and reveals that it was the burglar from back in the studio that he could have stopped. And the look on, I don't know why they did this, where they actually added the dots to the mask's eyes. It just seems weird, but it's like, but his what he says here, that that face, it's, "Oh no, it can't be. It's the fugitive who ran past me, the one I didn't stop when I had the chance." We go to the officer saying, "Oh, we might have to rush him. We can't take a chance of him slipping by in the dark." "Captain, look! It's him! On a spider web!" And we see Peter here with the mask off, going, "It's my fault. All my fault. If only I had stopped him when I could have. But I didn't, and now Uncle Ben is dead." And this is the point where he learns, as we go into the next little frame here, that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. That is a line that is famous throughout the Peter Parker Spider Man lore. with great power comes great responsibility. It was great when they especially did it in the first movie, and they tried to continue it on in the second and third one. They kind of hinted at it in the Amazing Spider-Man movies.
He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
And for some stupid reason, Hollywood was like, no, we're gonna make up some bullshit instead for the Homecoming Spider-Man.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
So yeah, that was like one of many issues I had with the new Homecoming Spider-Man, because they not only did they not touch on the Uncle Ben thing really, and the great power comes great responsibility, but they kind of just looked past it, which that is something that you need in the Spider-Man Peter Parker story. Even though when that Peter Parker Spider-Man got introduced, it could have been like a couple of years later. They might have been trying to move on from it, but the fact that it's just seems like it's completely freaking ignored, except for a few mentions where it's like, you know, where you could do some good things and you didn't, and stuff like that. It's like, no, that's not how it goes. Anyway, yeah, this was the very first introduction to Spider-Man and Peter Parker that we've first see in general, and it more or less has become the base for the origin itself. I mean, the origin itself gets done over again and again, but this more or less becomes the guideline to the origin of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. So, yeah, there's some cases where I hate that the origin gets divert away from this stuff, but there are times I can understand where it has to be redone for the different generations and times. I am definitely going to be afraid of the time when we have to fully look past this true origin. Yeah, that's it for the Amazing Fantasy number 15 Origin of Spider-Man. Next time the next video I was planning on doing and might be doing when I get to it will probably be covering the first Amazing Spider-Man comic itself. And I guess we'll see how that goes, and hopefully this series of videos and stuff might get over well enough that I can continue it with other comics as well as other stuff that I can try and dip into. So until next time,